Test, test, test. Cool. Sounds good. Just doing stuff in the shop, of course. Random stuff. I'm gonna do some loud stuff while we're waiting for people to actually show up. Get it out of the way. I'm gonna dremel some stuff, but I'm gonna mute this while the machine's going until somebody actually shows up. I'm upside down. That's okay. See, there's looks like there's one person in there. I don't know if that's Heather or somebody else. But hello, and thanks for coming. Just doing some random stuff today in the shop. Oh. Yeah, I'm upside down. It, so, it's funny because, I'm gonna take this off for now. I'm done sanding. I was on mute because I had the dust collection and the Dremel going, and I figured it would be better to not have the sound on for that. But when I put this top down like this, I have to flip it upside down so that it's oriented the way that it is in real life. If I have the camera, because the way that the camera swivels on the thing, the camera is technically upside down when it's looking straight down. And so I have it flipped so that when I move my hands in and out of the frame, it's not like a mirror image, which is what it wants to do normally. But yeah, so it's just easier for me to see what I'm doing. But then if I do this, of course, then it makes me upside down. But that's okay. Nobody cares about my face anyway. People want to see what I'm doing anyway. So, and actually, I was gonna let me see if I can get Heather to look at her phone long enough to bring down our Quest board we're working on. Because this thing is pretty cool. But for anybody who was watching and wondering what bit I was just using, so this is I don't remember even where I heard about this trick, but this is actually, and of course you can't really see it, but it's a ceramic bit. I think I have it linked on our Amazon page, but it's a ceramic bit that's for like doing nails. But it is great for actually like sanding and smoothing out resin stuff. So like that's what I ground down the little pour spout on these with, because it doesn't clog very easily. It does a pretty, I mean, it's for nails, right? So like it does a pretty good job of eating through material, but also is easy to get a smooth finish with. I haven't tried it on foam, but it works great on on resin. The only thing, this happened yesterday. I know I just got done saying it doesn't clog very easily, which you can see there's a little bit of stuff on here. It didn't clog. So I had this thing I had fixed, and I was sanding it, and I guess there was like there was just enough super glue like in a little pocket inside that hadn't cured, and when I hit this and like sanded through enough, the super glue inside the piece like spurted out all over this, and of course like instantly cured. It was completely covered in like super glue and resin dust, which I got most of it off. I actually used this stuff is dangerous but also pretty awesome. It's Uncure, which basically it's a solvent, and if you put it on super glue, it totally breaks it down. And so I put some of it directly on here, and then I was just like, I just keep using it on things. Like I put a little bit on here before I sand something, and it helps break it down and has gotten most of it off now just after one day of doing that. But yeah, these ceramic Dremel bits are awesome for like, especially if you're used to using the sanding drums. These basically do the same job but don't get worn down quite as quickly, which is good in that they last longer. The one thing though is I know like when I use the sanding drums, you kind of get used to how it sands. It gets smoother over time, and like you kind of compensate for that, or like you actually sand it and make it a little bit smoother before you start using it fully. But yeah, but these ceramic baits are nice because they basically stay exactly the same for a really long time without breaking down. You can't really see it on the camera now, but basically it has kind of like it reminds me of like shark tooth kind of effect. It basically has these little triangles that go in a spiral, and it's a hard bait. It does get hot when you're sanding a lot, so that's just one thing to watch out for compared to like the sanding drums, which also get hot, but not quite as hot as that does. But so yeah, working on some Ahsoka bracers and hand guards. These I actually am getting ready to, let's see. So the way that I finish these off is, oh, come on. Stretch. Well, I'm just going to do it up here. Forget trying to get it into the dust collection. But so these are cold cast, so I put a little bit of just the cheap black acrylic craft paint that I use for all my base weathering. Make sure I get in the notches, and then just kind of do a quick once over. Quadruple zero steel wool, and for these, the Clone Wars stuff all has, especially on the new season, has like that kind of almost like a crosshatch on everything. So normally with cold cast and buffing it with steel wool, you want to always go in one direction because that makes it, if you're kind of going all over the place and like in circles and everything else, it doesn't look as realistic like metal, because metal doesn't usually have that. Because the Clone Wars stuff though has kind of like a crosshatch, what I like to do is I go like at a 45-degree angle this way, and then I go back and do 45-degree crossways, and I try to follow like the plane of the thing, so you can kind of see it has like this. It has these two planes on these hand guards. So I do one side at a time, and you'll see it takes off a lot of that, the paint that I have on there too, which is good because I don't want most of it to actually stay there. And this is just really light. In that one direction. You can see that it already is way shinier than the non-buffed section. Do a little bit more around there, get rid of some of those chunks. And then I'll do the other side, same thing. And you can see like some of that black stays there. I just want a little tiny bit so it looks a little dirty. Her hand guards are pretty clean compared to a lot of stuff. So you probably, I don't know if you can see it. You can't see it on this camera, but so now I have on this going this way and this one going this way. And then I'm just going to go back lightly and then go the other direction on each side. And then same thing on this side. And then I'll go around all the edges. I don't really, especially on this piece, there's no need to worry about the bottom because it's, it goes on your hand, so it's going to be completely covered. Oh, nice. How many does that leave before you have all the Hogwarts stuff, all the Harry Potter Lego sets? I don't even know how many there are altogether. So, let's see. You probably, if I get it close, can you see the... I'm going to try and mess with the focus on this, but see if I can get it to focus close up so you can see the difference. Oh, and I was going to get, just as another point of comparison, So this is what it looks like fresh out of the mold. This is still a cold cast, but you see it looks kind of flat. And then this is literally the only thing I did is clean it just so that the paint will stick, and then did the acrylic paint over it, and then the finished buffed version. So if I hold these side by side, should be able to see quite a difference. Maybe if I can get a good light reflection in there. Let's see. It's still pretty, I mean, this is reflective just because it's a flat and somewhat glossy surface. But it's just glossy gray reflection versus you can't, just doesn't really capture it very well. But I promise it is a much more metallic shine than this, even if you can't necessarily see it on camera. But let's see if I can at least get a little bit of a close-up so you can see what I'm talking about with the way I do the cross-hatching. Let's see. Will you cooperate? Let's see if I can get good. Definitely got it in focus, but it's just not really picking it up very well. You can kind of see a little bit how it has the crosshatch both directions. And actually, up close, I think you do get to see how that's more of a metallic shine than just a flat plastic shine. There you go. So yeah, so working on these sets. I'm going to do more of that in a second, but in case you're wondering what other stuff that I'm working on, anybody know what this guy is? This is almost ready to go. Need to do a little bit more sanding, but forgot I accidentally turned the autofocus back on. You're gonna just stay off and stay like that. There you go. Perfect. Yep, it is Sub-Zero. Somebody is getting a they're a couple and they're doing Sub-Zero and Jade, and got costumes commissioned from a friend of ours, who then recommended them over to us for a couple of prop pieces. So we're doing the Sub-Zero mask, and then for Jade we're doing her belt and her staff, which I have to say, this stuff is really cool, and I think it's perfect for her staff. Oh, you know, these cameras just make everything look poopier than they are in real life. But anyway, so her staff is like a glowy neon green, and so I got these cool, they're polycarbonate tube, just like you would get in a lightsaber, basically, because I mean she basically has a double lightsaber. But yeah, so it's like a neon green and it's frosted, and so which I think will look pretty spot on for what her staff is. And yeah, so for Jade we're doing the staff and the belt and then the mask for Sub-Zero, so that's fun. Something a little different. And then I didn't realize, I posted this yesterday, and I didn't realize so many people would like it so much, so I thought maybe I would show it off on here and talk about it a little bit. For the Final Fantasy XIV folks, which apparently there's way more of you than I could ever have imagined. This is the elemental gauge from Final Fantasy 14, and this is the specific, um, like, for people who don't know, like the different crystals and the different counters and the gauge and everything all change throughout the game, and like these are right now it's blue, but like the color of the gems and stuff change based on what elements you're using and you're being affected by and stuff. But and so I actually there's a base of this which doesn't have like the arm, it doesn't have the little diamond counters, and it doesn't have the gems up here. So in modeling this, to get to the final stage, we started with, we're just gonna model from the model the base and then kind of build up from there. So we had to make some tweaks along the way, but yeah, this is all resin printed, and then this is just the prototype. So I resin printed everything, and then I decided the client didn't ask for it, but I was like, what the heck? I felt like painting it, so I painted the whole thing, all using PlatFX paints, and they're actually gonna make this. It's gonna be real metal with actual gems, and so the crescent part is going to be one piece, and then the little arrow web part is going to be a separate piece, cast in two different metals, and then they're gonna take like gems and stuff that they can't use. They make they make other jewelry. Oh, and so you can actually see. I realize now that you can't tell the scale of this in the pictures I posted before, but obviously now you can because it fits in my hand. It's basically about 3 inches long, and the idea is they're gonna put jump rings on the 2 points here, and so it'll be a pendant that you can wear. I'm gonna do this upside down because why not? So, so yeah, so it'll hang. Come on, camera, cooperate. But yeah, so it'll hang and like on with like 2 chains coming down on either side. So I'm really excited to see how that turns out. It's been really cool working with them. This is our 3rd project with them, and it's cool because everything that we do is plastic and foam, right? So this is as close to metal as we get, is cold casting stuff. So it's really interesting to see and to go through the process of what works and what doesn't for molding and casting for metal versus plastic. Because obviously, we mold stuff all the time that has super fine details, and when you're molding it in silicone and casting it in resin, it's really easy to get super fine details, and it's just interesting learning how there are some changes and some things that you can and can't do in metal versus what you can do with just plastics, and even like in my head I would think like, oh well, you should be able to make things thinner out of metal that will be stronger than the same piece out of plastic. But there's I don't know why. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I imagine it has to do something with like the surface tension of like liquid resin versus liquid metal and stuff, and just like it being able to fill in some of those details and things, and also things that are too thick also have a problem with, and part of this probably depends on the types of metals and stuff, but there was one of the pieces that we worked on before, we actually had to shrink it down some from the original design and redo it because the main body of the pendant was so thick that just because of the way the metal cools and everything versus the way like resin cures, it was too thick, and so the metal would get all pockmark instead of having a nice smooth finish because of the way that it cooled and just how thick it was. So it's been really interesting learning all these things about molding and casting and how I have to change some of the design work that we do for jewelry specifically that's going to be cast in metal versus something like this. So because again, right, this is resin, so I can get, I don't know what on all these details will or won't translate, but in stupid focus. I need a camera that I can use and do better focusing on. That's what I need. All right, I changed a little bit. But yeah, like these little arrows and stuff. Even on here you can't see, but there's actually like detail on those, and there's just a ton of little details. And another things too, like these little crystals, right? Like I just super glued these on here, of course, which doesn't work for jewelry. So that's one of the things that I'm interested to see how they work that out to cut gems and actually attach them to this piece. I imagine they'll do some sort of like soldering on some sort of fitting on there to hold whatever gemstones they're going to use. But yeah, so it's really cool. It's been fun. We did the first project was it. It's funny too because each project gets like significantly more complex than the last one. So like the first project we did for them was just a bangle that is like has two D20s on the ends of the bangle, so it's like a like a cuff bangle. They're just two D20s that has the company logo on it, and it's like it was just really cool to see like the first time we made something that came out in metal, and then the second one was a pendant that of the puddle jumper from Stargate, which was definitely a lot more complex, and that was one where there was lots of thin parts and thick parts, and so we had to go back and forth and play a lot with that. And then this is like way more complex, so it'll be interesting to see what lessons we end up learning from this one once all is said and done. But I cannot wait to actually see a real metal version of this. It'll be so cool. Go back to, and so and then these are the bracers, obviously, that go with the hand guards. What I do on these is like these are pretty straightforward to finish. It's the black wash, the steel wool, and those are pretty much done. These get quite a bit more work done on them, and so what I'll do with these is I need to just sand this down a little bit more from where I did the Dremel just to make it all smooth, but all the rest of the edges are already all sanded. So on the bracers, what we do is, let me see if I can zoom out a little bit more. Why are you so floppy today? Stop being floppy, camera. There we go. Okay. Flatten. The first thing I do is I'll go, and on these, there's anywhere where there's like it's sanded through the cold casting, which is mostly just like on the top edges and stuff where the pour spouts and air holes come off. So the first thing I'll do on these is I'll actually hit them with a little bit. We have this airbrush paint that's chrome. It's a really crappy chrome because it doesn't look anything like chrome, but it's a really nice like aluminum stainless steel looking finish, which is perfect because that's what this is, right? So what I do is I hit those spots with the chrome paint, and the chrome paint basically comes out looking a lot like this. So I'll hit those spots, let that dry, and then I paint the blue part in here. Again, I have my own mix of Ahsoka blue, which looks different on camera than in real life. That's okay. That's to be expected. But it's Plat FX paints, again, the same paints that I use to paint the other thing. But yeah, so I have my mix of Ahsoka blue that I made. So I'll paint those on here and in here. This gets cut out because the light panel goes through here after it's all said and done. But yeah, so I'll do the blue. Then I do the steel wool on the whole thing, including some on the blue so that it has like some scratches and things on it. And then the very last thing, if there's anything left, then I can just do little tiny touch-ups on any other of the chrome paint when it's all done. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. This is the thing that I really wanted to show. So, some of you might have seen this. I posted it, and so did Heather. So we were talking yesterday about. Come on, there we go. Okay, so we were talking yesterday about chores for the kids and like, doing like a board that has like, here's the chores, here's how much money you can earn for each chore, and like you take a thing off of the chore board, and you do the chore, and then at the end of the week, whatever chores you did for the week, you can cash in addition to your allowance. So the kids all have like their own normal chores, but these are like above and beyond things. So like, hey, if you do like a full clean on a bathroom, you get an extra $2 or whatever. And so normally cork board, some note cards, throw it up, you're good to go, right? But that wasn't good enough for us because we got to be extra and crafty. And so then we started talking. We were like,
I'm gonna entertain myself while I bribe my children.
Right. So we were spitballing at some ideas. We're like, oh, like it would be cool if it was like, like a job board or a adventure board from like Breath of the Wild or Borderlands or what, Skyrim, any of those games where like you go and there's like, the wooden board and there's like the little notes and stuff and you get your quests. So we were like, okay, that is what we're gonna do, and we're just gonna do it out of foam. So Heather yesterday busted this out in like no time at all. So this is the board. This is just floor mats, by the way. We didn't even use the good stuff for this. This was all just scrap. So this is a floorboard, a floor mat, and then extra pieces of floor mat. And she just dremeled all the wood grain, which you can kind of see. You'll be able to see it better once it's painted. But she did all the wood grain in here, and then we plastic dipped it. So this is going to be where the actual chores go. And then this is a little sign. I think it's going to hang on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
It hangs off the bottom. And it's
really
going to...
poorly spelled quests.
Yeah, it's going to have quests on here. And originally we were talking about like making the little... We're going to still use note cards, but we're going to weather them so they look kind of like... We're gonna do some experiments with weathering note cards or maybe using some parchment paper, but we want them to be pretty sturdy to put the chores and everything on and make them all look like weathered, dirty paper or whatever. And originally we were like, well, we can just use this kind of like we would a cork board and stick it on with pins. And they're like, well, but then like after using it a lot, it's going to be full of holes and the kids are going to wreck it and everything. So what we're going to do instead, which we haven't figured out exactly how we're going to do it, but we're going to put basically pegs or hooks on here that are permanent, and then each of the little things will hang on a peg or a hook for the kids to take off.
I'll just cut
little foam dowels and just
Yeah.
stick them on there.
Yeah.
And then that way the board doesn't get beat to hell from use. And then we're gonna make little for each kid, since we're gonna pay them once a week and everything on the board is like a once a week chore. I think we still have to come up with what the actual
there's only
quests
gonna
and
be
prices
like a
are, but
of chores that are kind of above and beyond what they already do, but it's stuff like
clean the bathroom,
cleaning up the dog poop in the backyard.
Right.
Is one of them. That one's gonna be like bonus money because it's poop.
But since we're gonna pay them out at the end of the week, we need a way to like collect what you've done and everything. And so we have a pattern that's just like for a one-piece foam like belt pouch. You just cut it out and then fold it all up and glue it together, and it makes like a little pouch. So we're gonna make 4 of those, one for each of the kids, their name on it, and then put those probably like on the wall next to this
the
or
sign
whatever.
Goes above it, and then the little pouches can hang below it.
Oh
So
yeah, that would work. Yeah, if we put that up top.
Or whatever.
We put that up top, and then we can have the bags down here, the little pouches down below, one for each person's name, and they open. So basically, you take a card, you do the chore, you put it in your pouch, and then at the end of the week, we'll take each person's pouch and go like, okay, you did this chore, and then obviously we'll double check.
And it needs a parent seal of approval. Like they have to.
We have to sign off on it.
Yeah, so they have to prove that they did the chore in order for them to be able to put it in their thing. So I'm playing around with little reusable like Velcro seals to put onto that
look like wax symbols.
Yeah. Because extra.
Yes. So extra. But yeah, so then at the end of the week, we'll go through their pouches and be like, okay, these are the chores you did. verify that they actually did them, and then give them their extra allowance money. But just to make it a little bit more exciting and interesting than note cards on a corkboard.
Well, I hope to give them initiative. I want them to take initiative to like do stuff instead of us having to ask them all the time. So it's
Right.
trying to make it enticing enough for them to want to do it, and also bribing them.
Here you go.
Thanks.
Thanks for bringing that down.
Yeah.
Sand up the rest of these.
Oh, in good news, this stuff, the vinyl we just got, sticks to itself. So, yay.
Oh, that's good.
You can tell them all the adventures with silicone-based vinyl.
Yeah, so what Heather is referring to is obviously I talk pretty much every time I'm on here in some capacity about trying to be more sustainable and eco-friendly, especially in a hobby that is very much not so in general. And so one of the things that we purchased not too long ago, there's a company that makes a more sustainable, like eco-friendly faux leather. And the stuff we got is really great. It's super soft, it sews nice. The only problem with it is that instead of being like a plastic base, the reason it's more sustainable is because it's actually like a silicone-based fabric. It has like a fabric backing like most vinyls do, but the actual like the top coat stuff is silicone, not like polypropylene or whatever the heck all of those fake leathers are made out of, which is really great unless, as anybody who has worked with silicone knows, unless you need to glue anything to it or you want to paint it. It's not impossible, of course, but it requires a lot more work if you need to glue or paint the fabric, which gluing and painting vinyl fabric is something we do a lot of. And we didn't really think about it ahead of time because we were so excited to try out this new eco-friendly stuff that we bought it. And we've actually used it a few times without any problems because the things that we initially used it for didn't require any painting or gluing. And so we were really happy with it. We're like, oh yeah, this stuff is great, blah, 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 blah. And then Heather is working on a armor commission that we're doing and making the belt. And so she was like, oh, I'm going to use that new stuff for the middle part of the belt. And if you haven't seen it or like don't have it in your head, basically the way her belt works is there's like several layers. There's like a thick outer ridge, and then there's like subsequently smaller strips, and there's no seam lines on anything, right? So normally like you would just sew the different strips down and you'd be fine, except there's no seams on, at least not that we can see from any of the pictures, and so everybody has been gluing those layers on top of each other, not sewing them, because you don't have any seams that are visible. And so, not thinking about it and forgetting about it, forgetting about the new faux vinyl that we had was silicone based. Heather cut the pieces out like we have on the other belts that we've made, put barge on them, and let the barge dry like you do with contact cement. Came back, stuck the pieces together, and it all fell apart. And we were like, what the hell? And like, I don't know why. It's one of those things like, we bought it so long ago, and you know, just with all the other craziness in the world, like we just totally spaced on the fact that stuff was silicone based. And so like we racked our brains and like tried all like several things last night to try to get it to stick to it, and like we used I have this flexible CA glue, which CA glues usually work really well for gluing faux vinyl that are plastic, because it's CA glue. Of course it works great on plastic fabric, right? And so I was like, oh, we'll use the flexible stuff. That'll be perfect because it'll glue. And then since it's fabric, it's the same glue that we're going to use to glue the Ahsoka armor, the urethane rubber, to the costume. But of course that is also plastic and not silicone, which is why we're making it out of that. So it all fell off, and we spent way too much time before we remembered that, like, oh yeah, duh, it's silicone based, so of course it's not going to stick. And then of course on top of that, you know, all the Star Wars, especially like the armor stuff, all needs weathering, and we usually do weathering over top of the fabric. We're like, well, okay, so not only is this not going to stick, but even if we do manage to get it to stick, like if we got Silpoxy or something that would actually work, then we would have to get silicone paints to weather it instead of the paints that we normally use, and like figuring out, and like, so it's basically, it would be this whole other process just to get it to work, versus, well, or we can just go and get some more of the stuff that we used before that is a plastic vinyl just for this and be done with it. So that's what we did. And now she's remaking it with the other stuff. So, you know, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it or how much experience you have, you're going to screw up and make mistakes. It just happens. That's the takeaway. That is not... Ugh. Okay, so I'm actually going to switch over to the other table, because I'm going to do a little bit of molding. And oh, we can talk about the other stuff that's over there too. So I think I turned this off. Yeah, okay, good, that's off. You know, it's funny because having an Etsy shop, I usually, unless like a mold goes bad, I usually leave stuff up in our store pretty much indefinitely. And I'd have to go back and double check, but I'm almost 100% sure that this, out of all the things that we've made and sold, I think I've made and sold the most of, which, no, if you guys know what that is just by looking at it, let's see, make sure I'm actually holding it up to the camera decently. Oh, come on. Oh, yeah. So I like to call it the Baby Groot hat. But it's the Ravager badge that Yondu has and some of the other guys have. But yeah, it's really interesting because I think I've made more of these and sold more of these than anything else that, what? Oh, come on. You know, go away. Not you guys. Stream manager, there we go, okay. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's such a random, small piece that, you know, I mean, it has some cute scenes in the movie, obviously, Baby Groot hat, but, hello. It's just interesting to me that of all the stuff that we've made, like, so many people want this, and the way that we, I'm gonna cast that in a second. We used to, the Ravager badges, and we have a whole bunch of different badges of different sorts. We have the Ravager one, we have the Horde one from the new She-Ra. But when we first started making badges and things, we would glue pin backs to them, but we switched out to these magnetic name badge holders. They're great because they're self-adhesive, so you peel it, still put a couple of bits of super glue on there, stick it to the back of the badge, and then the way these work, if you've never seen them, is pretty awesome. So the thing that sticks to your part is just a little metal plate, and then this piece comes off, and it has 2 rare earth magnets embedded in this piece of metal. So it's really nice, and so you put it on your shirt, right, and or whatever you're going to wear it on, and it just sticks, and you don't have to worry about like a pin back falling off, or if it's the kind like the opening and closing, you don't have to worry about stabbing you. You don't have to worry about making holes in your clothes or your costume. So we really love these name badge magnets, and you can use them for other stuff too, obviously. But yeah, magnets are your friend. But yeah, the name badge ones we really love because they're so versatile. Oh, I've been meaning to say this. I don't know if I have before, but it's interesting. One thing, especially since we're talking about molding and casting, so all of your molding and casting materials say this on them probably. Stir well before using, and or shake well. And what you'll probably notice is that you never see me stirring or shaking the things when I'm streaming. And the reason is because this is something I see lots of people doing, even people who have lots of experience. It doesn't mean to stir or shake it right before you use it. It means to make sure that it's stirred or shaken well and things haven't settled enough in advance of you using it that it doesn't impact what you're doing. But if you shake it or stir it right before you use it, you're basically introducing a ton of air bubbles. And sometimes it won't matter, but if you're trying to do something, especially something that's a small, delicate part, even this, these little corners and tips have a tendency to get air bubbles pretty easily. And so usually what I do if I'm going to do molding and casting is, if I know I'm doing casting, I'll come in, I'll shake everything up really good, like 30 minutes to an hour before I'm actually going to use it, and then that's it for that session. Like if I'm doing for a long period of time, maybe I'll do it 2, maybe 3 times a day. But in general, like I shake it first thing, and then that's the only shaking I do. So just keep that in mind. Don't shake it all the time so much, unless you want air bubbles, or if you're doing something that doesn't matter about air bubbles, like pressure casting. Yeah, in general, shaking everything up right before you use it, not a good idea. And yeah, it's interesting because I've even seen people like where they're trying to cast something and getting like little air bubbles and like part of the troubleshooting was like, maybe it's just not getting mixed well enough, so I'm gonna shake it more. It's like, no, don't do that, please, you're just making it worse. Move this over here, turn this on. So I'm going to use that in a second. So I put a little bit of the powder in here and a little bit of yellow tint. And I have, I'll show you in a second actually. I have pre-tinted resin over here. I have one bottle that is just pre-tinted with some black to make it a little bit easier on myself, so I don't have to, since that's the most common is gray, so so I don't have to deal with the black tint every single time I'm casting something. I just pre-mixed up some of it. And so, like, for this, what I did is I added a drop of yellow and a dash of the metal powder to the part A, and then the part B is pre-mixed, which is why it's black. But you can see I only have a little bit of that versus if I don't want it to be gray or have a gray base, then I'll use the regular stuff. But, all right, that's good. That's going. Over here. This is armor, and what I am gonna do right now. There's a seam right here. And I left some of the support material on here on purpose when I glued these two pieces together. I don't know if you can see that, but so there's the seam. And I left the pieces printed, you know, that was the bottom edge. So it had a little bit of a brim on there. And so I left it on there when I glued it together, because normally what I do is I use like some just spare filament. This stuff just does not print, so I use it for welding. So I usually use filament and a hot knife and weld parts together, just to give it an extra stability than just the glue on the flat edges. But so this time I'm doing, I thought I'd try it a little bit differently. I left the brim on, glued it together, and now I'm just going to use the hot knife to take that little tiny bit of brim that I left on there and weld that down into it, so I don't have to have like 3 hands for this. In theory, this should work just as well, if not better, than what I normally do. And so I'm just using one of these regular old hot knife tips, and very carefully, very gently, just going over this little extra plastic and smoothing it down. It's easy with the hot knife, especially, you know, it's a 3D print, so it's a thermoplastic. Heat is how it gets, you know, how it prints in the first place. So heat will melt the crap out of it pretty quickly. So just very, very gently. Don't hold it in one place for too long. And this is a new hot knife, so I'm also partly getting the hang of it at the same time as I'm trying something new. Because, you know, if you don't have multiple brand new variables all at once, you're not doing it the hard way. This is the armor that goes with the belt I was talking about that Heather is working on upstairs. That's also what that final helmet cast is for this commission. So we're getting pretty close to having this commission all done. The only thing left is obviously the armor. Most of the soft parts are done, except for the belt and the boot covers. And then the armor, the helmet's cast but needs to be finished. And then it'll be all done. And there are lots of different ways to do this sort of welding thing. I know Some people try friction welding, which I've tried, and I don't know if I'm doing it wrong or if it's just not my thing. I can't get it to work right for me. Other people have suggested using 3D pens, which we got one and tried it. Also, not a huge fan. It is especially like I said, it's just really gentle, and so much of the stuff that we do can be sort of just moment of zen, just kind of zone out and very gently doing this. The problem that I had with the 3D pens, I don't know if anybody has tried one. I'll wait for the compressor to finish. I don't know if you guys can hear it or how loud it is, but it's loud to me. I think the mic might not pick it up because of the way I have it set, but like I said, I just kind of go slow. So that's the other thing, is you don't want to apply too much direct heat in one spot, because you don't want to cause structural issues in the surrounding parts either. But with the 3D pen, if you have never seen them or used one, it's like a mini handheld 3D print head extruder, and it just extrudes filament just like would come out of the extruder on your printer. Which, if you're just trying to do a seam like this, basically you can squirt out a bead, and it's hot, so it'll stick, but then you still have a bead, and so you have to smooth it out somehow. So then you have to do this anyway. So it's like using the 3D printing pen. It's basically doing double the work, because you have to put the bead of filament on from the pen, and then go back and melt it down and flatten it out anyway, like I'm doing now. And so in most cases, it's just as much, it's more work to get the same end result, and I am all about less work. The minimum amount of work required to do the job well. And it's not even like you do all that extra work. Like, I am for doing extra work if it means that the end result is better, but I'm not going to do extra work for the same result. That is just silly. So. There are some cases, sometimes, where one is easier or better to use than the other, though. Like, if depending on, like, this is obviously really easy because it's just a big flat thing. If you're trying to join something together and you have more detailed or a harder area to get to, then the pen could maybe be better. Actually, my favorite place to absolutely my favorite place to use the 3D pen actually is, the pen is definitely easier if it's a harder to get to spot and you don't care how it looks. So like, this is obviously the outside of the armor, so I have to get this, I'm going to sand it and coat it and a bunch of other stuff and to smooth it out anyway. But like on the inside, especially like on the inside of a helmet, like I was saying, so normally the way that I do this is I have a piece of filament in one hand. Think of it just like welding or soldering, right? Like you would have your solder or whatever. And so you're using two hands and welding whatever you're doing. So on the inside of a helmet, if you have multiple pieces, it could be really hard to hold the helmet and get your two hands inside there and weld it together. And of course, on the inside of a helmet, who cares what it looks like, right? It's the inside of a helmet. It doesn't matter if it looks like there's a welded bead in there. It might actually look cool. Or if a welded looking bead would actually look good on the exterior of your costume and match based on what the costume is. It's like if you actually wanted something that looked like a welded bead on a piece of plastic, you can use the pen and kind of like splooge it along, and then it looks like an actual welded bead, and paint it just like you would the rest and make it look like it's, melted metal. So yeah, like on the inside of a helmet, the pen can be the better choice, just because you only need one hand instead of two, and you can just put the plastic on there and walk away and not worry about it. Although if you do, like I said, you can still flatten it out, but if you want to just like quickly do an inside weld like that, then the pen is probably easier way to go. Cool. There we go. Boop. Turn this off right now. That's it for now. I'll have to glue all these together. So this is the chest plate for the armor. We do it in 4 pieces just so that it fits better on the printer and prints better. Yeah, so there's the chest, and then and these 2 pieces go here. So, man, I want some armor. I need to make myself some armor. Okay, I'm gonna go back over there now. Yeah, 3D printing is an interesting addition to prop and costume making. And there's lots of different opinions on it. Some people consider it cheating. Some people, think that you shouldn't use it for finished pieces. People have lots of opinions about lots of things when it comes to costuming and prop making. But I feel like there's this applies to so many things, but I feel like there's no right or wrong way to do anything when it comes to prop making, really. What I like to say is that the best way to make something is the way that you're comfortable with, that makes it the way that you want to make it. So if you are comfortable doing stuff with foam and you want to make something out of foam, then that's the best way for you to do it, right? Like if people want to learn more techniques and skills and branch out, great. But if you're comfortable and confident in something and you can make it look the way you want, then that is the right way for you to do it. And like nobody else can say that's the right or wrong way to do it. And so yeah, so 3D printing is, I got into 3D modeling like forever ago because I wanted to, way back when, like in college, because I thought about getting into like making 3D, like doing 3D modeling and stuff for like gaming and everything. And so I did a lot of 3D modeling for a few years forever ago, and then I kind of stopped, and because I decided I wasn't going to do that, so I moved on. But then when I got back into doing this, and 3D printers were starting to like come down in price and be more available to consumers, I was like, well, I have some, albeit really old 3D modeling experience, and like, hopefully that'll like help me learn and get into it a little bit better. And so I just started off with doing easy small pieces. So the very first thing I ever 3D modeled and printed for cosplay was the hilt for my sword for Ashitaka. That whole costume is like a ton of... It's the first costume I built everything head to toe from scratch. I even made the shoes myself. And almost everything I did on that costume was the first time I'd done it. So it's the first time I sewed a whole costume. It's the first and only time I've ever made shoes from scratch. It's the first time I made a weapon out of wood that was supposed to not look like wood. It was the first time I 3D modeled and printed a part to use as part of a costume and prop. It was the first time for my bow and arrows, the arrowheads, I sculpted out of clay, and then I molded and cast it so I wouldn't have to make a whole bunch. It was the first time I molded and cast anything for a costume. What else? It was the first time I did body paint for a costume. Yeah, there's like that whole costume was just like, I'm gonna try a million new things all at once for this costume. And but yeah, so, and you know, we mold and cast a lot of things that we 3D print. Like this was, you know, I 3D modeled and printed these, and then mold and cast them because it's easy, especially for something on this scale. Molding and casting it is easier, although like the light panels on these, I pulled this one out because I was talking about how we finish them just so you could see what they look like all done, but the light panels on this are actually molding and casting translucent pieces is one of the most difficult things to do. And so, especially if they're small parts, so these are the light panels, and these are just resin printed with translucent resin. And like, it's just so much less work and easier to just print these every time we need a set. I actually print a whole bunch at once, so that's why I have like a bag full of them, but it's easier and cheaper and faster to print these and get consistent results than to try and mold and cast this, especially something you want clear, because you know you need a pressure pot if you want to avoid all bubbles and a bunch of other stuff. And like, so, and these are open on the back, so we can put LEDs inside them. So it's like, it's not even like it's just a flat piece, right? And it's curved. So even for this little tiny thing, it would have to be a 2-part mold, and clear resin takes forever to cure. So like it would take a ton of work to mold and cast, to mold one of these, and then to cast these successfully the way that we want them. I mean, they're tiny, so it wouldn't take a lot of resin, but to make it efficient, we'd probably want to make a mold that has several of these in it at least. And even then, like, I think the fastest, like one of the fastest clear resins is still like an hour cure time. So you're talking about an hour to cure, and you need a pressure pot, versus I can print a build plate full of these on the resin printer in like 20 minutes. And they're every single one of them is always perfect, because, I mean, unless there's a printer failure, but there's a lot less chance of these not coming out perfect than, you know, you do all that work for a resin cast and it still doesn't necessarily come out. So there's nothing wrong with having 3D printed pieces as finished pieces, in my opinion. Even like this mask that I was talking about before, this is a 3D print. And the finished thing, it's going to be a 3D print. It's, you know, it's on somebody's face, so the fact that it's a 3D print is going to be much lighter than if it was anything else. And especially if it's something that's just a one-off like this is a commission, so like I don't need to reproduce a bunch of them. So it just doesn't make sense to not do it that way, in my opinion. But yeah, so this is, like I was saying earlier, so this is my Platifex Ahsoka blue paint that I mixed up. I painted on here. You probably can't really see, but I do the same thing that I did with the buffing the metal, but I do 2 layers of the paint, and I do one direction, the other one, then I go across the other way to kind of give it that hatch look as well on the paint. And then when I go back and do the steel wool on the metal, I hid in here, which is why you see a little bit of the paint coming through here and there to make it look more beat up and used. And then this is a test, so it has a bunch of wires coming off the back, but this one actually does light up. Let me see if I can get it to light up. Do I have any batteries down here? I did at some point. I might have used them for something else though. Well, I don't know. but yeah, like there's so many things that we make that the finished thing is a 3D print, and like I mean, you know, like if this was for a costume of mine, like the level of effort to like mold and cast this or do something other than just using the 3D print is like it's just not worth the it's not only is it not worth the level of effort, but like it's not, especially something like this, it's not going to be any better. This is it's printed, but it's resin. It's not any better than if I had mold and cast all of these parts, you know. So yeah, just like blanket. There definitely are times and places where 3D prints are a bad idea, but just like I hate seeing like the blanket statements that people make. Sometimes like, oh, 3D printing for your props and costumes is terrible, blah blah whatever. Yeah, no. And blanket statements in general are usually a bad idea and wrong, false. All right, so those are done. I'm gonna set these aside. Oh, I forgot this was down here since I was just talking about this. This is the. Let me wipe this off. This is the Ahsoka armor, half of it, that I cast the other day, actually, on the stream that I poured. This stuff takes about an hour to cure, so I have to let it sit in there for a while. But this is the stuff I poured the other day, and so you can see this is urethane rubber, so it's nice and flexible, which is great because this is the butt armor. So, you know, if this was made out of foam and you were wearing this to a convention, whenever those happen again, it would be really hard to ever sit down. Trim this edge off of here. But with our Ahsoka butt armor, sitting is not a problem. You can sit down, do some yoga poses, whatever, and it'll be fine. Pretty excited. I need to do a paint test on these. I didn't get to do my paint test yet, but I don't know if I talked about this or not. I don't think I did last time, but so I took this is the same stuff, urethane rubber, but this is Minerva's star from the Captain Marvel movie. This is just a cast of these, and this is my Ahsoka blue Plat FX paint, which you can see that Plat FX paint is really great. Like, it's super flexible and, you know, no cracking or anything. The only thing on the urethane rubber, you know, like any paint, is if you try hard enough, you can get it to come off. So my test that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna test putting the BJB flexible urethane coating over top of the paint, and I'm also gonna mix a little bit of the paint in with it, and then I'll paint another spot of that and see how those do and how they hold up to the paint sticking. Because the idea is to paint these and then have them be super durable and not have to worry about the paint coming off. Oh boy. Yes. Yeah, that's there's a whole lot in that one statement. Yeah, so like for example, this is whenever we use a model that's not ours and we post stuff, I always give credit. So like this is not ours. It's one that I bought that is and the other thing that nobody ever seems to really pay attention to is every website, everybody that sells 3D models, every website that has 3D models to download, every model has what licensing you're supposed to adhere to. And so like Thingiverse, CG Trader, every one of those sites, it has, and it says on there whether you can use it for resale, whether you can use it to make something that makes money, whether it's wide open, but you need to do attribution, whatever. And so, like, anytime we post anything, and that's the thing too, right? Is in general, if you post something and you don't say otherwise, people will most of the time assume that you made it, right? So if I post, like, I post these and I usually don't say, sometimes I try to say we modeled it because sometimes people ask, but like if I post this, I'm going to say, hey, like, here's our Ahsoka bracers, well, whatever, right? If I don't say, it means that we made it. When I post this, when it's done, I'm going to say, hey, we finished this Sub-Zero mask and this is where we got the file. It is such like not giving credit for things like the models and not adhering to the licenses is a huge pet peeve of mine because we sell files, and it's just art theft, straight up. And the other thing too is looking at the licensing. So there's I didn't want, like, I knew that there were a ton of models out there for Sub-Zero mask, and so I was like, well, I'm only making one. If I modeled my own, there's so many other ones out there that, like, I'm not going to be able to sell a bunch, whatever. So I looked through, I like narrowed it. Like, usually what I do if I'm looking for a model that I don't want to model myself is I'll go and I'll find all the ones that meet my needs for, like, look, I mean, there's, a million different versions of Sub-Zero. So I think I found, like, maybe 5 or 6 models that were the right version for the newest Mortal Kombat 11. And then I went through and, like, oh, that one's free, but it's non-commercial usage, and so I went and I looked through the ones that I had narrowed down until I found one that was, it was a paid one, wasn't very expensive, but it allowed for commercial use. So that's the one I got because I knew I was going to be using it for commercial purposes. Same thing with our armor helmet. Ooh, I'm gonna grab it, bring it over here. This was the original base for this was a file from Sean Fields that we purchased, and his files, all of his files are, he allows commercial use as long as you credit where you got the files from. And so, every time we post about it or share the helmet stuff, we tag him. People ask about the model and stuff, and we, like, send them, link to his store. Like, there's just, like, if you look at all of our listings for the helmet have a link to his listing if you want to buy the model instead. Like, there's just no reason not to, and it's such a huge problem. Because, people buy a 3D printer and they're like, oh, I'll just go and download a bunch of files and print them and sell them and make a bunch of money. And so not only is it people selling prints and files that aren't theirs and that aren't meant for them to make money off of, which is a huge problem. The other thing that has happened because of that is that you get a lot of people with Etsy shops selling, finished props that they just print something off the printer, slap some paint on it, and I think, although I don't have a problem with 3D printed props, what I do have a problem with is people not finishing something and calling it finished, especially when it's off of a file that they don't have the rights to sell. But that's, like I said, that we kind of already covered that. But then when people are selling things as finished work that's just a quick print and painted, what happens is, it's definitely it is absolutely the same as the recasting issue. I mean, a lot of people now will, especially like on the Star Wars groups, it's actually great because someone will be like, oh, I printed this out and selling this, and people basically just lump them in as recasters, even if it's a 3D printed thing now, which is great, and they get called out all the time. But that's outside of the Star Wars forums that boards that I'm in. Like, it's not as prevalent to call people out for that sort of stuff, and it causes all kinds of debates when people do it. But so the other part of that, though, is people selling stuff that is, not really finished. And what happens is, like, let's take this as an example, right? Like, someone will print this, paint it, and be like, oh, finished Sub-Zero mask, $50. And it's like, I'm just making up a number, right? But it's like, well, if I'm going to finish it and make it all nice and paint it and everything else, like that's going to cost $150 or whatever, right? But what happens is when there's all these stores selling stuff as finished props at really low prices because it doesn't take that much work to print something and slap some paint on it without doing any sanding or finishing or, you know, doing a coat of something to smooth it out or harden it. Like, you can't compete with that, and a lot of people just go like, well, that one's only $50, so I'm going to buy that one. I mean, you get what you pay for, but at that point, you know, you've already lost the business because now somebody isn't going to also go and pay you for even more than they already paid, and they're stuck with, you know, one that they already have. Like, the number of times I've seen people say, oh, well, you shouldn't have, like, people posting like, oh, I got this, and look, it's crappy. It's like, well, that's what you paid for. Like, that's what you get. I was like, well, what should I do? It's like, finish it yourself now because that's all you can do. Like, you know, you got what you paid for, you know, and it's hard too because, you know, part of it is educating people on like, if you are looking to pay that much money for that, you're gonna get something that's not great quality, and that's like one of the biggest challenges with like doing commissions and prop work and stuff is just like people see like the cheap unfinished 3D prints. They look at like, you know, off the shelf costumes that you can get from like China or whatever, and it's like, well, yeah, you can get a full costume for $100, but it's not going to be like custom fit to you. It's not gonna, you know, it's gonna have vinyl armor parts instead of like hard armor parts and, you know, all this stuff. But what happens, like we get this all the time, is people will, I'm actually surprised this happens as often as it does, but we get a lot of times where someone will literally send us a link to a costume from like, you know, one of those cosplay manufacturers, and it's like, oh, I want this costume, can you make this for me? And it's like, it's a $150 costume, and, you know, all made out of fabric and plastic parts, and it's like, can you make me this costume, but I want it like better quality, and I also want like the wig, and can you make this thing light up and do this, but I want to pay the same amount? And it's like, no. Like, if your budget is that costume, then you should buy that costume. Like, we've done that. I've done the opposite of that before, where, you know, it's like, oh, can I have this costume? And it's like, well, if you're, you know, what you're asking for is like $1,000, and you say your budget is $150, I'm going to tell you that our work and for something that involved is more than your budget. And so if you want, I will really give you a quote. But here's a link to a costume you can just order online that is within your budget. Because yeah, when you're like, when it's so far off from like expectation and reality, it's like the amount of work that we put into just doing a quote for a commission. Like, when it's that far off, it's like not even worth the effort of doing a quote. But we do give people the choice. It's like, we're gonna come back way over your budget. Are you sure you actually want a quote? But yeah, there's a lot of that. But, you know, fortunately, we do have customers who understand that you're, you know, if you're asking for a custom-made, custom-fit costume, right? Like, we're very thankful for the customers who do understand what they're asking for, and, you know, you're getting a one-of-a-kind, custom-made prop or costume or, you know, whatever it is, but it's custom-made, and you know, especially if it's a commission, usually it's one-of-a-kind, but and even if it's not one-of-a-kind, it's still handmade and custom-made for you. You know, it's not coming off of an assembly line, it's not cheaply made and everything else. So yeah, we're very thankful for the people who understand all of that. And, you know, that's why we always talk about it and try to educate. 3:30. I am going to call it a day for the streaming, at least. I think, I'm trying a new schedule for this week. I'm trying to remember what I actually put on the schedule. I think tomorrow is in the morning. Yes, tomorrow is 10 a.m. Basically doing the shop, hang out, and chat again from 10 to 12 tomorrow. Some more of this. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. Appreciate it. And if there's anything you have questions about or want to see or anything, drop us a note, like, anywhere on any of our social media or anything at any time. Like, a lot of this, like, the streaming stuff we do is just, I'll be upside down to say goodbye. Actually, I'll turn it around. Fine. But yeah, if there's anything that you would like to see us do on stream or cover, just let us know. Drop a note anywhere, I mean, on here or whatever, but if you send us something on social media ahead of time, we can actually plan for it. We like to do the tutorials on specific techniques and things, so if there's something that you want to see or hear about specifically, let us know and we can plan for it, and we can do like a specific targeted example tutorial kind of thing on here. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow. And I wish there was a faster, easier way to hit the end button, so I don't have to say goodbye and look stupid and then reach over here and